Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to the Message Marketing Pod. I'm your host, Christopher Melotti from Melotti Media, and this is a wonderfully special episode where we have the beautiful Leanne Elich here from Leanne Elich Consulting. As you can see, if you're watching, she is absolutely amazing with her style and fashion. If not, if you're listening, we've got a beautiful, what would you say, pink blouse,
puffy sleeve, back blouse, yeah,
and amazing glasses, fantastic hair. Everything about Leanne is phenomenal. And so we're going to, I'm going to introduce Leanne, but basically this episode is going to cover a bit more about AI, like a bit more of a deeper analysis of AI and its current role in the marketing world, especially this unusual personalization paradox that Leanne and I have talked about. That's why we were like, we need to get into this podcast, because in a world of AI, this personalization is becoming king, because we've got businesses jumping on it and we've got customers going, stop sending me generic stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Leanne and then let's just throw in. So Leanne, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Chris, for having me on. This is so exciting. And yes, I've got my big glasses. Thank goodness, otherwise I wouldn't be able to see, but that's all right. You've got to make them fashionable. Yes, I'm Dr. Leanne Elich. I am the CEO of Leanne Elich Consulting, and I'm a sales and business psychologist. So what we do is we work with clients and we teach them the skills, the strategies, and the tactics to ethically influence consumers and customers to purchase from you, to work with you and engage. And we do that with using the power of neuroscience and psychology. And there's lots of tools that we can do and we can use to be able to engage, and in terms of growing our businesses and making them profitable.
Beautiful. That was a great introduction. So as you can see, between myself being a marketing strategist and copywriter, and you've got Leanne being a sales psychologist, you've got two very great perspectives on this topic. So I think this is going to be a great episode. So, all right, let's begin. So I just think that today AI is here and it's unavoidable and it is what we are doing. And so I just want to start with this podcast saying this is not an AI bash at all. Like, this is actually explaining that like AI is a fantastic tool and we're excited to see where it does go over the next year, 10 years, 20 years. You know, it's going to change a lot of different things. However, I think that especially in its infancy, as marketers and as businesses, we need to be very careful of what we depend on and what we rely on compared to what we do. And I just want to say, Leanne, is that in the end, right, the customer is the focus, regardless of which tool we are, right? Go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what would you say in terms of like, and just throw in like, just vibe with me. I'm just thinking like, I saw Neil Patel, the US content like director, and he's a bit of a figurehead, especially in America.
A guru, isn't he?
Yeah, guru, right? And he was saying that, of course, he prefers like human written content because he says it's more, obviously it captures that human EI, you know, emotional intelligence. And also like, it's also that whole like nuance of language. But he said the main principle is not even an AI versus human argument. He said that in the end, content marketing's rules haven't changed. It is the most interesting and value offering piece that gets noticed. Doesn't matter anything else. And I think that that's what we've got to remember in this world of automation, is that we've got to make sure that we don't just hit plug and play and hope our customers lap it up, because our customers are incredibly intelligent. They've got lots of options. I mean, Leanne, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, that's right. And I love what you were saying about we've got to be careful about relying and depending. They're two really important words. And our customers are highly intelligent, you know, and what's happening is we're being conditioned and we are learning the outputs and of what AI, in terms of, I'm just giving the example using ChatGPT in this instance, but it's not just that, you know, just not open AI, all the other tools and algorithms that are out there that are based on artificial intelligence. But it is making sure the humanistic approach is actually, it's quite complicated. So it goes back to the, you know, rubbish in, rubbish out. This is what we used to always say in IT.
Marketing, right?
It's right. And even with, you know, back in the day as a clinician in the medical space, you know, if we weren't giving the, you know, algorithm, because we've been using AI for a long time, the correct information, we're not going to get the correct results back. But we can train the algorithm to create an output that is much closer or more similar, that mimics a human. But as we were saying before we were on the show,
Yes.
mimicking. We've got to understand that it is a mimic. It
Yes.
is not actually a person. One thing in particular that I've been very interested in talking about all of this is something called the Moravac's paradox.
Ooh,
And
interesting.
and this has
Go
been
on.
around since about the 1980s. AI has been around for a lot longer than
Yes,
we
and I
all
think that's
think.
what you mentioned that before. I think that's
Yeah.
something people don't even realize is that
Yes.
you personally, Leanne, have been using
Yep.
AI in the psychology world for a
Yep.
long time. Of course, it was in different forms, and it's not like people just think ChatGPT, but AI is like basically like the use of mass data to come up with patterns
Correct.
and
Machine learning.
machine
Machine
learning and all
learning.
that.
So back in the day, we would, especially in the oncology space, we would use specialized medical software driven by machine learning algorithms to input data
Yes,
around the patient's
fascinating.
internal organs. And it would learn the interfaces between the organs. So between the heart and the lung, or, the brain and the spine, the neck, the spine, the cervical spine, and learn how to encapsulate and what we used to call contour those particular structures.
Oh,
Now, of course, that has now germinated into something a lot more sophisticated, which is fantastic. Still
yes.
needs a human eye to
Yeah.
actually, make sure that it's accurate. We're talking sub-millimeter accuracy, but it's been around for a long time. We need to understand those principles and apply them to what we're doing now.
Yes.
So things that are difficult for humans, and this is where the paradox comes in, things that create cognitive load for us, that are
Yes.
difficult for humans, there's a lot of, I guess, logic and thinking that goes into it, is what we see the
Mm.
AI actually coming up with as acceptable. Because when we are activating our prefrontal cortex and we are trying to get into make, certain decisions, because we make decisions very quickly. We talk about,
Yes.
you and I have talked about mental
Oh,
heuristics many, many, many times, and they are just shortcuts and systematic errors in, creating a scenario or an assumption, which everybody does.
I just want to make sure everyone gets that. Like, so
Yeah.
what, just so that to clarify, so Leanne,
Yeah.
what Leanne is saying to everyone listening and watching is that basically what it's doing is AI is mathematic based. Right. So like, I think like with ChatGPT more specifically, it's like what it does is it doesn't understand context. What it does is it understands the maths. So what it's
Correct.
doing is, just for people who were like, well, what's going on there, is that it's like when what it would do is if you write the sentence and then you may have to, what it does is it looks at the maths of that sentence and says, well, logically, in this context, the next mathematical word or probability word would be marketing or something. And so what it's doing is it's trying to replicate patterns and human emotion through maths and patterns. Now, that's great for what you were saying, Leanne, but I just want to make sure everyone understands that it's like, is what Leanne is trying to say is that it's not actually understanding emotions. And that's where
It's called extrapolating.
good
So
word.
it's
They're
an
good, great word.
extrapolation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we extrapolate. So the human brain extrapolates as well,
Yes.
which is where our, I talk about, and if anyone has, done my courses or knows of me, I always talk about the fact that humans don't like to think, and everyone goes, well, I don't
Go
think
on.
so. I think we're all thinking. I'm like, well, the problem is that we actually don't like to think because it is difficult. There is too much information for us to interpret. So what we do is we take bits and pieces and we fill in the gaps. And that's which is what the mental shortcut or the heuristic is. It's filling in the gaps. But unfortunately, we sometimes fill in the gaps with the wrong info. So that's when we come up with a limiting belief or an assumption or something that's not right. The AI algorithm does the same thing. So it's extrapolating it's a mathematical extrapolation where it's looking at the sequence of what is happening and what the expectation is. Now, there is differences between, and again, just talking right now about Chat GPT 3.5 and 4.0. 4.0 is the paid version of Chat. Yeah. It does a much better job of extrapolation. So it is much better. Obviously, the algorithm is more sophisticated. There's a lot more machine learning involved, which is also why it's a paid, not that it's expensive, but it's a paid service as opposed to the free service,
Of course.
which is 3.5. Yeah. However, going back to Moravac's paradox, the algorithm can easily do for us and we can teach it to do what is difficult for us. So those,
Yes.
extrapolate those.
That's the balance,
Yeah.
right? Isn't
But
it?
what it can't do is what we find easy. So whether it's feelings, emotion, judgment, perception, what we do subconsciously, what we don't even realize that comes natural to the human mind, it comes natural to us. And this is also driven by personality. So to be able to humanize an algorithm, you need to spend a lot of time creating a person. So creating an avatar with certain emotions, certain characteristics, certain personality traits, a history of behavior, prediction of behavior for it to become as human as possible. Now, you need a dedicated person, a dedicated team to be able to do that. But there is still no guarantee. It's still a mathematical algorithm that you are going to be able to behave and get an output as you would as a person. In fact, it's very, very hard to be as accurate as we want it to be. So in terms of copywriting, it's great, and sales as a start. Be able to input these particular prompts, and it does come down to prompt driven, because that's the machine learning part.
Like to use
and putting in, extraordinarily accurate and very sort of focused prompts.
Yes.
As a start, but that human element, that emotion, that perception, that judgment, that every piece of work needs to then be modified, and actually it needs a human eye and a human brain to, not even glaze over, decipher, and then create, that body of work that resonates with the audience and with the customers.
I think that's the difference. I think that's what it is for everyone listening, is that AI is a great tool, but it's like, I was explaining to a few clients recently that it's like, when students use it, right? Students in an educational institution, whether it's Year 12, what doesn't matter, right? And the difficulty that they find with this is that they will, for example, one of my friends is an art teacher, and he was saying, I put in, sometimes I get assignments that are clearly written by AI, which, number one, that's the problem, right? Is that it's very obvious, again, to a human reader, that where it's awkward or weird language, right? But then the problem that that's holding AI back, and businesses of using AI, is that it's the ability to assess and judge the output and be able to craft it in a way. And this is the problem with students, is that they struggle to then, they get this output, and I always say, just because it writes better than you doesn't mean it's right. And that's what's happening, right? Is that we've got students who are putting in something and saying, analyze this painting for my assignment. It's coming up with this analysis. And because they don't have the knowledge or the acumen to know what that output should look like, they are then saying, that sounds good. Like, it sounds like it's assessing the right painting or whatever, and they give it to the teacher, and the teacher says, oh, this is not really a very accurate one, because it's just guessing at everything. And I think that's what businesses need to realize, is that, we at Melotti Media, we've been calling it the copywriting AI sandwich, which is the human copywriter start, so that we put in the right prompts, right? And the marketing consultant start. Then you have the AI to do the output, right? And then you need a copywriter to edit the output. Now, and what I mean by this is, because this is where, like the student example, what I'm saying here is that the student doesn't have the knowledge to be able to craft what the output was.
All the experience,
right? Whereas when you've got someone that has been writing for 10, 15 years, we have the ability to wade through all of the output and go, this is in the wrong side, or this is a bit offensive, or this has picked up some racial undertones, or it's misunderstood, and this happens so much.
And I think as a professional copywriter and professional, salesperson, salespeople that we are, we have not only the experience, but we're able to decipher what is correct and we've got that experience. And a word just popped into my head, and it's just popped out again. So hopefully for all you guys,
we'll just wait.
Yep.
I
wanted to pop back in, but it gives us, we've got the experience to be able to analyze whether something is correct or not. So interestingly, if I use an example, as back in the day when, again, in the clinical space, me as a experienced consultant and then, or clinician, and then having, say, a registrar as an intern, as they're learning and wading their way through to become, experts in their field, which at one stage they will become. But, as the student, example that you're giving, when we would outline and use the machine learning algorithm, or AI, artificial intelligence, essentially to decipher between different internal organs, what's acceptable to me will not be what's acceptable for someone less experienced.
Correct. And
that's what's happening with AI. So the comprehension is probably, that's not the word, that's a good word. The comprehension of the outcome is missed by someone who doesn't actually know or doesn't have the expertise in the field.
Yes. And that's what I think and people like listening might be like, oh, but that doesn't sound like, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it is.
Yeah,
it really is. Like, I mean, look, I've got an extreme example where I had a client that used AI to write one of their blogs, which was great because I had written all their brand messaging. So they put that brand messaging into ChatGPT and used it to build out the rest of the content. Brilliant use, right? It had the right prompts. But then what they did is they failed to look at what it was saying. And it came up with like awkward wording and strange things, but also it went on a weird tangent that he didn't even read and check. And it was all about like how it was trying to like talk about throwing a dinner party. And halfway through it was like, oh, here's how to throw out your customers, your guests if they don't like what you're serving. And do you know what I mean? Like, and this is what I mean. AI, it naturally took his prompt and went, oh, well, if they like, it was a guide to a dinner party. So if the people don't like the dinner party, then here's how to boot them out of your house. And it's just, that's what I'm like, and that's the extreme
interpretation.
Example. But that's an extreme example. But that's what I mean is that it's important that you don't just have anyone check the output. It's also, it needs to, like, messaging is extremely sophisticated. And I think what's happening in the market is that it's getting devalued. And it's a shame because all these messages that we see every single day on ad and pamphlets and all these sort of things, there's a real art to it. Because if you look at it, like I was reading a client's brochure yesterday and they said, oh, I've spent a long time writing this. And they sent it to me and I was like, oh, it's really cluttered. It's too convoluted. I didn't understand. I said, and I asked him which clients are getting this content. And he was like, oh, there's a new client. So I'm like, well, as a new client, I said, I'm not understanding. I know what you're trying to say in general, but it's not compelling enough for me to make a decision. Yeah. And he was like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And that's what I mean is that there is an art because people need to be sensitive to the way that the human brain
works.
And at certain points.
And also, sorry, Chris. Also, if we are using mental heuristics, so we use shortcuts, which we do, it's natural, and if anyone out there is going, oh, I don't do that. Yes, you do. It's a natural thing. We have to, otherwise our brain would literally explode. It's just too much information. And it's right, when you're articulating a message and it needs to be compelling, there are certain things that the brain will pick out to then make a decision. Is this information I want to absorb or I want to throw? So is it something that I want to put in my backpack or is it something I want to throw in the bin? But we need to make sure that the information that we have in front of us gives us that option to get some really good content to put in our backpack. We don't want to be throwing everything out. And what I've also with AI is there's a lot of repetition.
Yes.
So, and you and I have talked at length about AI hallucination and what happens here with misinterpretation. I've done a lot of testing, and when I have found with both 3.5 and 4.0, and I find that if there is something, that is quite not a general topic, something that is very specific. Yes. And you and I both, and we work with we've got very broad portfolios. We work with a lot of different industries, which is fabulous. But they each got their expertise and their uniqueness. Yeah. What AI doesn't do yet, and whether it will, is drive that originality into each of those genres or industries that we work with. It's too generic, and then where it gets confused and it starts repeating. So it's not that sentence is the, Chris, a sentence that we would do. What was the quick brown fox jumped over the whatever the fence,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah, the
repeats
lazy
that. It
dog.
will say, oh, then the fox jumped over and then the fence got in the way. So
Yeah.
it's the same concept being repeated. It's just mumbling, and jumbling the words around. I'm a facilitator also in what we call, so you mentioned EI, in emotional intelligence, or EIQ, which is the emotional intelligence quotient.
Yes.
I am a facilitator in an area that's not widely talked about called CIQ. So instead of EIQ, it's CIQ. CIQ is conversational intelligence. And there's only really a handful of us in Australia that actually work with this tool. And it's understanding transactional, positional, and transformational styles of communication. I can guarantee trying to have a conversation with the algorithm in a transformational way, which is where ideas are exchanged and what we call exchange of energy. So you write something, a customer would go, wow, that really resonates with me.
Yes, correct.
There's a transformation of information, but also energy. It's like, now I want to find out more, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah.
That gets missed during a AI conversation.
Yes. And so that's why, so back to the original discussion we had at the start of this podcast, which is this is not an AI diss. It's just the ability to make sure that we are all reflecting on the fact of that, how to use AI optimally. I think that everyone just have to remember this golden rule, that it's not a silver bullet, right? And I think people are starting to realize that. I think at first we all got really excited around the November, when it first came out, and then January, February, March was all I went to marketing conferences, and it was literally anything everyone was talking about, everyone was talking about it. I think now people are starting to get like anything, the market adjusts. And it finds its position.
And there's a lot of professors, there's a lot of, I think Stanford University are running a study. I think Harvard's running a study now, looking at, a lot more deeper into the, emotional and it's not lack of emotion. It is in a way, but the deficiencies, that's probably a better word of it. Now, I agree. I think it's a great tool. This is not, we're not here to blast AI. I think it's great. And as we mentioned, I've been using it for a long, long time. And there is things and outcomes and patient outcomes that have been achieved that could not have been achieved.
Of course.
In the aid of artificial intelligence, but it's not because of, it's
yes,
the
there
aid.
we go. And that's why I like the basically looking at all the research, looking at firsthand experience from the both of us, is that what we want to remind everyone is that a fantastic tool, but remember its pros and cons. Remember its limitations. I think that's what we need to do and it's because we're using it as well, and we're editing a lot of its copy, and we're doing a lot of these things, and that's great, right? And it's not going anywhere, and that's a good thing. It's got a lot of positives to it, but it's remembering that it's not a way to just bypass it. It's not a way to I'll just get, our customer service team to just go, how do I answer this question, copy paste and put it on the website, just because there's so many problems with this thing. First of all, what we talked about with that personalization paradox is that when it sounds like it's generic, people get bored. When your brand sounds like 17 other brands in your street, what do you think is going to happen? Price competition rather than value competition, which is never where a business wants to be. And it's important. It's also the strategy that comes before it. Like you mentioned, Leanne, you were saying in there that it's like AI relies on your prompts, but that prompt can't just be, I paid this person $1,000 and they gave me a prompt and I popped it in there. It needs to be that it's doing all the research. It's saying, I'm talking to this customer in this way at this point of the journey. It needs to take into account these certain things, and all of that needs to be taken into account before you get output that's half decent. Then you need to be able to edit it and clean it for your brand tone and messaging and all these kind of things. So it's really important to remember that it has to be checked. It's a tool.
Yeah. And the best way to do this is to give the algorithm a persona. Imagine you are and you can put details in, create imagine you are a male, 35 male, this expertise in this. Yeah. I behave like this, or they behave like this. And then the nurturing of the avatar in AI is what actually will give you a better outcome, but that takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that's really more, it's teams that are able to do that. But from a behavioral science perspective, it still does. I mean, it's like I was watching a documentary. I love documentaries, and
I bet you do.
watch I'm nuts over, a good documentary, and read a lot of clinical papers and publications. And there was and a lot of you listen and watching might know exactly what I'm talking about, but they were looking at, AI and the use of AI in warfare. And there is a lot of great ways to protect the humans and protect the soldiers by sending, being able to decipher what is happening on the other side of the wall or whatever. However, they then brought up that if they gave the AI a certain persona and said, if you see this, so this was, but what and this obviously is all prototype, but what a lot of the professors were worried about is like, how can they make sure that they don't shoot a child?
Yeah.
How can they make sure they don't shoot the wrong person? I mean, obviously by giving it a persona and giving it an output that say, it needs to be this, whatever, but there is still danger of misinterpretation.
Yeah.
That's danger of that lack of comprehension that we talked about before, of exactly what the outcome is going to be. It's an outcome driven device.
Yeah.
Anything mathematical using logic needs to have an output, needs to have an outcome. It's the equation, that we put in, and the variables that we put into that equation that gives us whether it's a good outcome or a bad outcome.
I love it. Well, let's wrap it up. I think that I think that the point we're trying to make is AI is here. It's here to stay. It's great. It's advancing. It's a good thing for businesses, but we've got to remember where it starts and stops. And I think that there's a temptation for businesses to just go, oh, this is my new copywriter. This is AI is now, I'm paying for the subscription. This is now how we do branding, or this is now how we do all of our emails. And I think that there's a danger there, and it's a very serious danger. It's simply because you need to be able to because people can sniff that out. As I said, I've seen on LinkedIn, people go, wow, was this written by you or ChatGPT? And that's incredibly embarrassing and damaging for your brand. So it's really important that we are remembering as businesses that our customers are demanding us they've got a high expectation of our brand.
That's right.
And if you are using tools to bypass the human element, it means that it's basically demonstrating that you are trying to shortcut the process of caring for them. And I know that sounds so dramatic and extreme, but what it means is if you're just flicking them, here's another piece of content, I was speaking to a client, and he put on LinkedIn, he used a prompt to come up with this LinkedIn post that talked about his learnings from the first few years of business. And I said, oh, wow, how did it know that? You must have put in some serious prompts. He said, oh, no, it made it all up, but I don't care. And I said, oh my gosh, right.
So and now we're talking about lack of authenticity.
Yeah, lack of authenticity. And I said, this is the problem. I said to him, are you sure you want to do this? Because what's happening is, and first of all, you're creating a persona for yourself that people can't even relate to because it's not even you, right? And I said, second, don't you worry about that. And then, third, and I said, can't you, surely you don't need to buy prompts in order to put that basic information together. All you needed to do was say, business.
That's a concern that you are actually buying prompts and getting an output from an algorithm that talk about your history and who you are.
And not even his.
And
because he's just thinking, and this is what the danger is. That's why I'm summing up, is that the danger is that what is happening is I worry that people are going to get too reliant on it. And so what is going to happen is they will lose their sense of authenticity and genuine action, because it's too easy to go prompt. It comes up with 5 things and they go, yeah, that sounds relatively good. And then they post it. And that's what I'm worried about, is that we're losing that human element to it. And that's the paradox that I wanted to raise. So Leanne, anything to summarize here?
Yeah, look, I agree 100%. This has been great. I think we could talk about this for hours. I mean, you and I could talk for hours anyway, let alone something like this. And, maybe we need to back it up with, and support this episode with, the ethics of AI, because what you just described to me is actually unethical behavior. And of course, everything I do.
Oh my God, I've really shaken you, haven't I? And it's
ethical there. I'm like, hang on a minute, that's not good. But if we are using a device, no
Yes.
matter what it is, that lacks human element, we need to substitute that with a human element.
Yes.
And that is us.
Yep.
So again, great tool, as you were saying, fantastic as a starter.
Correct.
It does lack those things that we find easy and that are subconscious, using that paradox, judgment, perception,
Yeah.
that subconscious analytics that just comes naturally to us. And we have a duty of care
Correct.
when we're running our businesses and to our clients and our customers, that we are providing the best that we possibly can. So we need to add that human element and that emotional element to it. And then that ends up being a masterpiece piece of work.
Correct. So that's what we wanted to get. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Joining us, really, Leanne and myself, for this episode of the Message Marketing Pod. So I'm your host, Christopher Melotti from Melotti Media. And please jump on. There's a whole library of podcasts that we have there that are all for free. Lots of great information. Leanne, thank you so much for joining. So check out Leanne Elich Consulting. She's fantastic at what she does, and you can't miss her. She's phenomenal. And look, I look forward to speaking more about this AI topic in the future. Thank you, Leanne.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.